So in this next video, I'm going to talk just about the Korean War. It's pretty lengthy by itself. I'm going to save these other points for their own video. But in the last video, we talked about how the Cold War extended to Asia with the fall, with communism taking hold there. There was a civil war between the nationalists led by Chiang Kai-shek and the communists led by Mao Zedong, and how it kind of shocked the world, shocked America definitely, that communism successfully took hold there. But you can do a lot when you have the support of the people. So that revolution in China really inspired the revolution that we're going to see in Korea. So let's talk about our efforts to contain communism there. There's a great brain pop video that you can go and watch on the Korean War. Again, if you want to go check that out, the username is James Bowie, all one word, JamesBowie, and the password is brain pop. Go check it out. But it essentially says that during the Korean War, that during World War II, Korea was controlled by the Japanese, and we know that the Japanese lost during World War II, so they lost all of the territories that they had influence over. So now that the war is over, the Russians are going to step in and try and rebuild North Korea. You see the Russian flag there. And America and the other allied nations are going to step in to rebuild South Korea. So that worked for a while until communists in North Korea wanted to unify all of the island, the peninsula of Korea under communism, and so they attacked South Korea. So here's a newspaper headline from that event. So the Korean War is pretty easy to understand. I like to call it a seesaw war because of how it goes back and forth. So we start here again at what's called the 38th parallel, this line of latitude that almost divides Korea in half. Like I said before, the North Koreans invaded South Korea, and they're almost successful at taking over the entire continent until American and UN forces arrived. They had even taken the capital of Korea, Seoul. That word is pronounced Seoul. We stopped them before they can reach Busan, completely conquering the island. And our UN forces, led by General Douglas MacArthur, who you remember from the island hopping campaign during World War II in the Pacific, he pushes the North Koreans all the way up to the Yalu River, which is the border between North Korea and China. It's at that time point, now remember the Chinese are communists and North Korea is communist, that the Chinese send troops to aid the North Koreans, and they push us back down. Now this completely angers Douglas MacArthur. He wants to get permission from President Truman to extend the war, to push them back and extend the war into China, but Truman says no way. I fear that will start a World War III, so he denies him from doing that. But eventually the South Korean forces are successful again, and they wind up pushing them back almost to exactly where the war started, and they sign an armistice. An armistice isn't a treaty, it's just kind of a lay down your weapons, but there was no official end to the war in Korea. They just signed an armistice. It's like a pause, it's like a ceasefire. So they have this border now between North Korea and South Korea called the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone, and it's one of the most heavily guarded parts of the planet. You have North Korean soldiers on one side and South Koreans on another, and they watch each other day and night to make sure that neither one crosses the border in order to keep the peace. we were talking about MacArthur wanting to push further into North Korea because he was angered that the Chinese had assisted the North Koreans. But Truman definitely said no. Um, and MacArthur thought that was appeasement that we saw with Hitler during World War II. You know, a person is doing something wrong. You should address Mao Zedong, who was the leader of China. But Truman just refused. So what MacArthur does is he sends a letter to a congressman, a friend of his back in the United States, expressing his disagreement with Truman's decision, and he hopes that somehow it will get leaked into the newspaper that Truman is being weak on this issue and that he needs to press forward. But it doesn't go the way he wants. It gets back to Truman that one of his top military officials is publicly disobeying his orders. So this action gets Douglas MacArthur fired. But don't cry for him too much. When he is sent back to the United States, he still has rock star status. He's still a highly decorated general who fought in World War II and brought the country success. So he still lives a good life. So like we said, the armistice was signed in 1953, and the 30th parallel becomes the official border that separates North from South Korea. So there's an old school picture showing you, warning signs as you come close to the border. If you get a chance, definitely check out these videos. They're so interesting. More information about the Korean War and the DMZ. And here's some good review questions. So pause it and try your best. North Korea and South Korea are very different countries today. North Korea has developed into a very reclusive and oppressed society. This is a Google image I found of North Korea and South Korea from space. Look at the industrialization that you see in South Korea. Here's the island of Japan. Here's China. Here's South Korea. You can see the capital of Seoul is lit up. But North Korea, because it's so poor, they can barely afford most times to keep on their electricity, so it's always going out. And this is another good video showing you life at the DMZ. Check them out. So the leader, during the Korean War, the leader was Kim Il-sung. His son that took over from him, Kim Jong-il, recently died a few years ago, and now his son, and it was pretty interesting to see his death televised on TV, his funeral televised on TV, and now his son Kim Jong-un is the leader. This is Hanseo Lee, and she has a very interesting story about escaping from North Korea. Check that out. Again, the son of Kim Jong-il is Kim Jong-un, and we thought that there would be opportunities for peace after one dictator died, but it seems that Kim Jong-il is destined to go in the same steps as his father and continue a dictatorship. And a few months ago, Dennis Rodman went and visited the oppressive country, and most Americans were outraged as how can you hang out with a dictator. But Dennis Rodman has always been a weird bird, so who cares. South Korea today is very different than North Korea. It's bustling, it's hustling. It was in the running. I believe they had an Olympics there. It's just a lively and bright city, no different than a Las Vegas or New York City or Paris. And the song that was a hit a few years ago, Gundam Style, by this singer named Psy. He's from South Korea. So take a minute, pause it, and try and answer this question. So Truman is going to decide not to run again. The whole affair with the Korean War ending almost the exact same way that it began is kind of a black eye to him. The Korean War, for that reason, is sometimes nicknamed the Forgotten War because people don't really want to, remember the lives lost fighting there, only to have nothing really change. So he decides not to run again, and Dwight Eisenhower, who we remember as the famous general from World War II, the European conflict, he runs for president and easily becomes elected. His campaign slogan, people give him the nickname Ike. So he and his vice presidential running mate Nixon, they sweep. No problem getting elected. The soldiers are returning home, and it is just a joyous time. We have one of the largest post-war baby booms ever to be seen in this country. This period in history after World War II, after the Korean War, is the largest population growth that we've ever seen in this country. So there was love all around, and people born in this period are nicknamed the baby boomers. So here are some famous baby boomers you might recognize. So one question that still remains, though, these soldiers returning home, what is to be done with them? We definitely want to make sure that the people who fought, gave their lives in service to us are taken care of. So the government passes something called the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944. And it's basically what it sounds like. Helps our servicemen readjust, gives them money to go back to school. It helps them if they're disabled, buys housing, gets them a loan so they can get housing, and training for jobs. So it's a good thing, the GI Bill, and it still exists today. Here's a good question about it. And that is where we will pause and talk about the next section of how the Cold War intensified.